Most people wake up, eat something they believe is healthy, and have no idea they might be working against their own metabolism before the day even starts. It's not because they're lazy or undisciplined. It's because almost nobody talks about the one organ that actually determines whether your body burns fat or hoards it: the liver. Here's a number that surprises most people. Roughly 1 in 3 adults has some degree of fatty liver, and the majority don't know it, because early-stage fatty liver rarely causes obvious symptoms. No pain, no warning signs, nothing that would make you think to get it checked. But when the liver becomes overloaded with fat, something important changes in how your body handles energy. It becomes harder to access and burn stored body fat, particularly around the midsection. That's why some people can eat carefully, exercise consistently, and still feel like their body refuses to let go of stubborn weight. Let's talk about why that happens, and about 3 breakfast foods that can genuinely help. Understanding the liver's real job. Think of your liver less like a passive filter and more like a busy distribution center. Nearly everything you eat eventually routes through it in some form. Fats, sugars, proteins. The liver processes them, decides what to store, what to convert, and what to send back out into the body as usable fuel. Under normal conditions, that system runs smoothly. Fat comes in, gets packaged into a transportable form, and gets shipped back out to be burned for energy. But when fat arrives faster than it can be processed and exported, which happens easily on a diet high in refined carbohydrates, added sugar, and ultra-processed food, it starts to accumulate inside liver cells. Over time, that buildup is what doctors call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Once the liver reaches that congested state, it stops functioning as an efficient export system. And because the liver plays such a central role in regulating how the body uses fat for energy, a congested liver often means a body that struggles to burn stored fat, no matter how well you eat or how often you exercise. This is the piece that gets left out of most diet advice. Sustainable fat loss doesn't start with willpower at the dinner table. It starts with whether your liver can actually do its job. Food 1. Whole eggs. Eggs, yolk included, are one of the richest natural dietary sources of a nutrient called choline. Choline isn't as famous as protein or omega-3s, but it plays a specific and essential role in liver function. It's required to package fat into a form the liver can export, called VLDL, so that fat doesn't simply sit and accumulate inside liver cells. Without enough choline, fat has a harder time leaving the liver, even if everything else about your diet is reasonable. Multiple nutrition studies have linked low choline intake with a higher likelihood of fatty liver, and clinical research restricting choline in human diets has repeatedly shown liver fat increasing within weeks, a reversible pattern that improves again once choline is reintroduced. This is one of the main reasons nutrition researchers generally recommend eating whole eggs rather than egg whites alone if liver and metabolic health are a priority. The yolk is where nearly all the choline lives. Pairing eggs with a drizzle of good extra virgin olive oil isn't just a flavor choice. Olive oil is rich in monounsaturated fat, particularly oleic acid, which research has associated with improved insulin sensitivity and better regulation of how the body partitions fat between storage and fuel use. A 2018 trial published in a peer-reviewed gastroenterology journal followed 50 patients with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease over 12 weeks. Those who consumed extra virgin olive oil as part of their daily fat intake showed meaningfully lower liver enzyme levels and measurable improvement on liver ultrasound, compared with a control group using a different oil. So the pairing matters. Eggs help move fat out of the liver. Olive oil supports the body's ability to actually burn that fat once it's mobilized. Food 2. Plain Greek yogurt with berries. The second food is less about a single nutrient and more about a system, your gut. Every time you eat, signals travel from your digestive tract to your liver and pancreas, essentially communicating how your body should respond, whether to store incoming energy or release stored energy for use. When that communication is disrupted, which can happen with a diet low in fiber and fermented foods, the signaling tends to default towards storage, even when calorie intake isn't excessive. A notable 2019 study followed 100 women with both fatty liver disease and metabolic syndrome over 24 weeks, comparing daily yogurt consumption to daily milk consumption. The yogurt group showed a meaningful reduction in liver fat content, along with improvements in liver enzymes and markers of insulin function. Researchers also observed reduced intestinal permeability, commonly referred to as leaky gut, along with lower markers of inflammation and shifts in gut bacterial composition. Berries add a second layer of benefit. They're relatively low in sugar for a fruit, high in fiber, and rich in polyphenols that have been shown in research to improve insulin sensitivity. Because insulin is the hormone that most directly tells the body whether to store fat or release it, keeping insulin levels more stable throughout the day supports easier access to stored fat, including the fat that tends to be most stubborn. Pairing yogurt and berries with a small amount of olive oil slows the overall rate of digestion, which helps prevent the kind of rapid blood sugar spike that can otherwise trigger a stronger storage response. Food 3. Avocado. The third food challenges an old assumption that eating fat automatically makes you gain fat. Not all dietary fats behave the same way in the body, and avocado is a good example of one that supports fat metabolism rather than working against it. Avocados are rich in monounsaturated fat, primarily oleic acid, along with plant sterols, fiber, and a range of B vitamins. Research has connected these compounds with improved insulin sensitivity and reduced markers of systemic inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation and elevated cortisol both tend to push the body toward a more fat-storing hormonal state, so foods that help calm both of those systems can shift that balance back the other way. In practical terms, that means a body that isn't constantly overreacting to food with a large insulin spike is a body that has an easier time drawing on stored fat for energy, rather than continuously adding to fat stores. Why the combination matters more than any single food. None of these three foods is a miracle on its own, and it's worth being honest about that. What the research actually supports is more modest and more useful. Each of these foods nudges a different part of the same system in a helpful direction. Eggs support the liver's ability to package and export fat. Yogurt and berries help stabilize gut-to-liver signaling and insulin response. Avocado supports insulin sensitivity and lowers inflammatory load. Olive oil, used across all three, supports the metabolic signal to use fat for fuel rather than store it. Eating just one of these occasionally is unlikely to move the needle much. The research showing meaningful improvement in liver fat and metabolic markers generally involved consistent daily intake over a period of weeks to months, not a single meal. A note on olive oil quality. Not all olive oil delivers the same benefit. A significant portion of olive oil sold on store shelves has been found in independent testing to be diluted, oxidized, or lower in the polyphenol content responsible for many of its health effects, sometimes due to long storage times, exposure to light and heat, or blending with cheaper oils. If you want olive oil to actually contribute to the effects described in the research above, a few practical guidelines help. Look for extra virgin on the label, ideally with a harvest date rather than just a best by date. Dark glass bottles protect the oil from light-related degradation better than clear glass or plastic. Single origin oils are more traceable and generally more consistent in quality than blends. Genuine high polyphenol olive oil often has a noticeably peppery, slightly bitter taste and can produce a mild burning sensation at the back of the throat. A perfectly smooth, mild-tasting oil is sometimes a sign of lower polyphenol content, not higher quality. You don't need an expensive specialty product to get these benefits. You need a reasonably fresh, genuinely extra virgin oil, stored properly and used before it goes stale. What realistic expectations look like. If you already know from blood work that your liver enzymes, ALT and AST, are elevated, or if imaging has shown fatty liver, a structured approach, eating these foods consistently for roughly 8 weeks and then retesting, is a reasonable way to track whether things are moving in the right direction. Research reviewed here generally showed measurable improvement within a period of weeks rather than months. though individual results vary based on overall diet, activity level, and other health factors. It's also worth being clear about the limits of any breakfast strategy. If sleep is consistently poor, if physical activity is minimal, or if stress remains chronically high, no combination of breakfast foods will fully compensate. Liver and metabolic health respond to the whole pattern of how you live, not to any single meal in isolation. Whether you eat these 3 foods together in one meal or spread them across the day comes down to personal preference and appetite. What seems to matter most, based on the research, is consistency over time rather than any particular timing or combination ritual. The bigger picture. The frustrating truth for a lot of people trying to lose weight is that they're doing many things right and still not seeing results, not because they lack discipline, but because a congested, overworked liver makes fat loss harder, no matter how carefully they're counting calories. Supporting liver function through food isn't a shortcut or a hack. It's addressing a mechanism that a lot of conventional diet advice simply leaves out. If you found this useful, it might help to check your own liver enzyme levels next time you have blood work done, just to see where you're starting from. Small, consistent changes to breakfast won't undo years of poor metabolic health overnight, but they're a genuinely evidence-supported place to start.